Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 2nd of March, 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So, I put out a tweet today where I said, if you don't want centralized exchanges to freeze your assets, there is one simple solution. Withdraw your assets to your own wallet, preferably a hardware wallet. The ability to self-custody digital assets is one of the most amazing innovations of crypto. Take advantage of it. Now, I put out this tweet because of all of the, things we've been seeing with regards to funds being frozen, not just in crypto, but without of it. Obviously, there was the stuff with the Canadian truckers a few weeks ago, and lately there's been the stuff with the sanctions in Russia and stuff like that. So I think that I'm not making any kind of moral case here, any judgments or any kind of for and against here, but if you keep your assets in a centralized place, it opens it up to them being frozen. And on top of that, if you use centralized assets like a centralized stablecoin such as USDC or USDT, you are opened up to them being frozen as well. So in that kind of instance, it's not, if you have USDC on a centralized exchange and you withdraw it to your own wallet, it may just be marginally better, but it's not really that much better. I mean, you're still holding an asset that can be frozen by Circle at any time that they want to freeze it. So I guess there's risk there. Now, the assets that I'm talking about here are the true kind of self-custody assets such as ETH on the Ethereum network and BTC on the Bitcoin network and a bunch of assets on Ethereum, obviously tokens and stuff like that. So keeping them on centralized exchanges or any kind of material amount on centralized exchanges, especially if you're just holding them in cold storage and not actively trading them, is definitely not a great thing to do. Not just because of the risk of them being frozen or the risk of them kind of being hacked or the exchange kind of losing access to them, but also the risk of just in general kind of not the exchange itself freezing it, but kind of you getting caught in the crosshairs of things, because there are different reasons the exchange will freeze your assets. One of them will be in response to law enforcement, right? If they suspect you of doing something wrong, they'll freeze your assets. You won't be able to move them. They'll basically make your kind of account worthless until they restore access at some undefined period in the future. Secondly, they might freeze them as part of their compliance effort. So they might say, hey, we're just doing compliance efforts. We need you to provide some additional information. Until you do this, your assets are frozen. And then there's possibly a bunch of other reasons that they would freeze your assets there. But they do have the ability to do that. And it's because it's technically their assets. They've just given you an IOU. They've basically given you a promise that when you go to withdraw those assets to your own address, they'll honor that withdrawal. But while your assets are in the centralized exchange, they own the keys to it. You do not own the keys to it, so your assets are as good as theirs and not yours. Yes, there may be some legal protections here and things like that, but they are normally not great to rely on and take a lot longer to play out and could take potentially years to play out for you to get your assets back in case of a hack or in case of things being frozen or kind of you may never get it back. And obviously people who had their assets in MT-GOX are kind of very familiar with that. It's going on 7-8 years now where those assets have, as far as I know, not been returned yet. So that's a very, very long time. Obviously, it's a good thing for people since back then because it's a majority of it's BTC, and BTC has gone up a lot since then. But these people don't know if they're getting all of it back, when they're getting it back, all that sort of stuff, right? So that's just one example there. And, as I said in the tweet, take advantage of the fact that we have this amazing thing or this amazing innovation in crypto where we can truly have self-custody over our assets. Because when you think about the existing financial system, what assets do you have true self-custody over, right? Really, at the end of the day, I guess the only thing you could argue that you have true self-custody over is cash, right? But cash is kind of useless in this day and age because you can't use cash in a digitally native way. If you want to use cash in the digital world, you have to deposit that cash into a bank, a centralized intermediary, and then the bank will issue you some, digits in your bank account that represent the cash that you have in the bank, and they'll be like, okay, well, now you can use the digital payments infrastructure. Now you can use MasterCard, Visa, whatever it is to do your digital payments. That's not a digitally native payments infrastructure. That is just a kind of band-aid on an existing system that was never created, or existing monetary system that was never created for the digital world. Whereas crypto was created for the digital world because it is digitally native. It does not exist as a physical thing. Of course, you can print out a private key on a piece of paper and argue that that's physical ETH, but it's not, right? Because the ETH only exists in cyberspace. It exists on the blockchain. It exists on the internet, and it is digitally native. Now, because of that, you get true custody over your ETH in your own Ethereum wallet. You don't have to put it in a centralized intermediary in order to turn it digital. It is digital, which means that everything that you can do, with digital payments in the traditional system, you can now do once the integrations kind of like come online further down the adoption cycle, you can now do in a completely self-custodial and decentralized way. This is the key innovation of crypto. This is the biggest thing in crypto. This is the biggest innovation in money in, thousands, tens of thousands of years. This is what we should all be very excited about. So given that kind of reality there, you should really be securing your own assets. I know that some people don't like to do it because they don't trust themselves, and that's exactly why banks came around too, right? Because securing a lot of cash is both kind of like physically cumbersome, but also kind of like mentally draining because you have to worry about security. But when it comes to the digital world, I mean, you have a hardware wallet and you can store as much crypto as you want on that hardware wallet, whether it's, $1,000, $1 million, $1 billion. It's the same thing. It's just digitally native money. It's not like cash where, storing $1,000 of cash is easy. Storing $1 million of cash is difficult, still doable in your own home. Storing $1 billion of cash, forget about it. Like, it's just so cumbersome to transport it, to count it. I don't have to go through the reasons, right? You can imagine $1 billion worth of cash and $1 billion worth of ETH. What's easier to keep track of and count and use? You guys know the answer, right? So from that perspective, I think that no matter, what amount you have in crypto, if it's a material amount, and by material amount, I mean, if it's a large percentage of your overall net worth and you're just holding it as kind of like a long-term hold, there's no point keeping it on a centralized exchange, in my opinion. You should keep it in your own hardware wallet, self-custody it, do everything from a hardware wallet, whether that be a Ledger or a Lattice One, and even just in your own kind of like wallet is better than a centralized exchange, even if it's a hot wallet. Now, I obviously don't recommend putting large sums of money into a hot wallet, but it's still marginally better than a centralized exchange. But of course, you're going to be responsible for your own custody, responsible for securing those assets, securing your seed phrase, securing your hardware devices. But, in my opinion, for most people, for the majority of people, like 99% of people, that is much better than keeping it on a centralized exchange. I do realize that there are a lot of bigger players out there who legally have to keep it on a centralized exchange. And there are bigger players out there who are targeted in kind of like attacks to steal their crypto, which is, totally reasonable to kind of like secure it, I guess, like on a centralized service. But as an individual, as a kind of like regular individual, it doesn't pay to have your assets on centralized exchanges, in my opinion. And obviously, not all centralized exchanges are created equal. Assets on Coinbase are much safer than assets on an offshore exchange, for example, or assets on one of the smaller kind of like centralized exchanges. But, we have a long list of incidents on these centralized exchanges over the years that it should kind of like get you to just store your assets yourself. And not even just for security reasons, but also for the fact that you can actually do it. You can actually do it in a digitally native, truly self-custody and decentralized way, which we've never had the ability to do so before, whether it be kind of like crypto assets or cash or kind of like monetary assets, or whether it be things like collectibles. I mean, you can do it with NFTs, which is obviously very awesome as well. So I just wanted to kind of give a bit of a spiel about that for you guys, but you guys know that I'm a big proponent of self-custody if you are comfortable doing so. If you're not, fine, keep it on a centralized exchange, but just realize that by doing so, you open yourself up to additional risk. And if that risk is kind of like less risk to you than securing your own assets on your own, well, that's your prerogative. The beautiful thing is that you have a choice, right? It's not like the physical cash world where, or I guess the physical financial system, where you can't actually do anything with your cash in the digital world unless you put it into a centralized intermediary. You don't have the choice there. So yeah, I think that's one of the coolest innovations of crypto, and I hope that more people take advantage of it. All right, so on to some core developer updates. So Alex Stokes announced EIP 4863, which is a new EIP for Beacon Chain withdrawals called Beacon Chain Push Withdrawals. And as Alex describes it here, this EIP provides an alternative to the pool-based flow that offers tight integration with the core protocol. So if you want to read the full EIP, you can do so. It'll be linked in the YouTube description. It's kind of like not a long read. There's a bunch of kind of like discussions going back and forth about it too already, between a bunch of the core devs and core researchers, which is really cool to see. But yeah, in layman's terms, this is potentially the EIP that will go into the Shanghai update, which will enable withdrawals of staked ETH and of rewards kind of like in the ETH kind of like beacon chain as well. So obviously this needs to be done, but as I've said before, it's probably going to happen about 6 months after the merge. So we may see it later this year, if not early next year. And as I've said before, there is not going to be a mass withdrawal of ETH, guys. There is a validator queue, which means there is a limit to how much ETH can be withdrawn each day. And as I've said before, I believe that limit to be around 30,000 ETH roughly each day, which is a far cry from the 10 million plus ETH that is staked. It's not like there's going to be 8 million ETH withdrawn all at once and just dumped on market. That's not how this stuff works, guys. And the funny thing is there's a kind of like a few million ETH there that exists as RETH and STETH and a bunch of other liquid staking as well that can be sold at kind of like any time at this point. So I think that a lot of people who are staking their ETH plan to do so for a long time and plan to just sell their rewards. So from that perspective, you know, I just, anyone who kind of goes on about these mass unlocks and things like that, they just don't know what they're talking about, right? But anyway, off track there a little bit. Definitely go check out this EIP. It'll be linked in the YouTube description below. All right, so Trent Van Epps has another tweet to add to his thread that I spoke about yesterday, to add to his kind of like tweets that he's talking about with regards to the merge. So this is number 5, where he says, to any stakers, you should start running a local execution layer client ahead of the merge, because in the future, outsourcing this to third-party providers will open up stakers to slashing risk under the proof of custody game. And you can read this blog post from Dankrad about this here and about this what this means for you. So, in layman's terms, if you are a solo staker and right now you're running an Ethereum 2 or a consensus layer client and beacon node, whether that be Prism, Lighthouse, Nimbus, Teku, whatever it is, and then you're outsourcing the Ethereum 1 node or the execution layer node to a third party such as Infura or Alchemy or MyCrypto or anything like that, doing this in the future opens you up to this slashing risk. So you should be running your own local execution layer ETH1 client, full node, whether that be Geth, Nethermind, and a bunch of the other ones out there. I run kind of like Nethermind and Geth. I like to run both of them, so I'm running my own client there. It does require you to have a bit more extra solid state drive space on your staking box if you're a solo staker, but it shouldn't be too much. I mean, as I said before, solid state drives are relatively cheap these days, especially compared to hard drives. And, you know, if you want to future-proof yourself, you should probably even just get like a couple of solid state drives, have one running your beacon node and your validator, one being home to your execution layer, I guess, node or ETH1 node. And you're all well and good. And yeah, a couple of 2 terabyte drives, not very expensive these days in the SSD realm. And then you're kind of like set for, I guess I would say, many years at that point, right? I don't imagine you needing much more than that. And if you're a solo staker, the rewards that you'd be getting would be more than enough to cover the cost of that too. And it's just the cost of doing business at the end of the day. It's not like you have an ongoing cost of electricity and hardware and having to upgrade the hardware all the time. This hardware can be future-proof for quite a while. So yeah, just a really great tweet from Trent here. And the blog post that he links to will, of course, be linked in the YouTube description. All right, so a huge announcement out of Arbitrum over the last 24 hours. It seems to have flown under the radar a bit. So Arbitrum have announced something called AnyTrust Chains, which is an Arbitrum mode for ultra-low cost transactions with strong security guarantees. AnyTrust Chains will operate alongside Arbitrum 1. So I guess the Explain Like I'm 5 is that AnyTrust Chains is Arbitrum's answer to Validium, ZK Porter, and even things like AVAX subnets and stuff like that. So the reason I say this, and I think it's actually more secure than the AVAX subnets, but the reason I say this is because what Validium and zk Porter do is that they take the data off-chain, off the Ethereum main chain, and kind of like put it into a kind of committee, and that committee is responsible for securing the data. And I've talked about this before, right, guys, where you have off-chain data, on-chain transaction proofs, and you have much better security than a traditional sidechain or something like an AVAX subnet, but you don't have kind of like the full security of a rollup, but you still have really, really great security. But the benefit is that you get much cheaper transactions. So in this blog post, Arbitrum details that these kind of like things, these AnyTrust chains, are really good for lower value stuff, just like how Validium is used for immutable X for lower value stuff like NFTs, and just like how zk Port is going to come around from zk Sync to do this as well. This is Arbitrum's kind of like answer to that. And the funny thing is that AnyTrust chains were Arbitrum's original construction in 2018, so it's kind of like come full circle here, which is really cool to see. But yeah, this was a huge announcement. I mean, I'd always wondered kind of like what I guess optimistic rollup teams were going to do to answer the things like Validiums and zk Porters and just off-chain data in general. And it seems that the Off-Chain Labs has an answer to this with AnyTrust chains. Now, I wonder if Optimism is going to do something similar. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but it's really great to see that Off-Chain Labs is pushing this kind of like world where they envision Arbitrum 1 as their main optimistic rollup that's fully secured by Ethereum, that they're kind of like putting all their resources behind as a centralized, team, but also giving the option for people to launch their own Arbitrum chains like Arbitrum 1, but also launch something like an AnyTrust chain, which is a cheaper and faster kind of like L2 chain with minimal trust assumptions, but just not as secure as a rollup. So very cool to see this. You can go read this blog post to get a full breakdown of what this kind of like all is. And I should mention there's also a fallback to rollup mode as well. So this is like I guess Starkware wants to do with their Validium. They want to turn it into, I can't remember the name of it right now, but they want to turn it into this as well, where you can fall back to rollup mode 2, where you can still post that data to the Ethereum L1 chain. And withdrawals will have the usual delay period, just like the standard rollup. So very cool to see this. I think this is where the tokens start making a lot of sense, because you want some way to secure the committee. You want to give the community the incentive to keep kind of like processing transactions, to keep themselves online, to keep the data available. And what better way to do that than having a token? Like, you can pay them out token rewards. You can have it so that they have to stake the token in order to get those rewards. And it's just kind of like adding crypto economics into the mix here. So I think, as I said before, like all these L2s are going to have tokens, but I was curious how some of them would actually kind of integrate them with their existing systems, or integrating with their ecosystem. And I can see this happening, and maybe it's a thing where these AnyTrust chains decide to be their own kind of like thing, where they're like, okay, well, I don't want to use the Arbitrum token. I want to use my own token. And that's totally possible too, but we're going to have to see how that all plays out as well there. But very cool to see this new construction from Arbitrum. Just another option for people to play around with. Just another thing on the Ethereum scalability belt, right? There's so much going on in Ethereum scalability right now, guys. It's absolutely insane. Like, I've lost track of it at this point. Like, as I said the other day, like just looking at what's happening on StarkNet alone as an ecosystem is very cool, and that's still very early. But then looking at Arbitrum and Optimism and Polygon and all this other stuff and zk Sync, good luck keeping up with it anymore, guys. That's all I can say. You're going to need maybe like 20 refuels a day just to keep up with it. And unfortunately, I can't talk for 10 hours a day, guys. I'm sorry. But yeah, I think this is good. I think this is just the way things are going to be from now on. I think the coolest and the things that come out will be the biggest things, and we'll probably hear about it. But it's going to be like trying to keep up with the internet, at this stage, trying to keep up with L2 stuff. But definitely go check out the blog post. I'll link it in the YouTube description. All right, so a new protocol, as I was just saying, I finding it difficult to keep up with everything, but this is one that came across my radar called zkLend, which is a money market protocol that is going to be native to StarkNet, combining zk rollup scalability, superior transaction speed, and cost savings with Ethereum's security. So they're coming out of stealth over the last 24 hours, and there's a blog post here that you can kind of like read all about kind of what they're doing. They also have a TLDR where they're saying they're tearing down the old guard, tearing down the issues of DeFi market makers, into zkLend, sneak peek into Artemis and Apollo, which is I'm assuming kind of like their version names for their kind of protocol here. So what they mean by tearing down the old guard is that they've got 4 key things that they're kind of trying to target here. So privacy. So borrowers no longer need to disclose their identity when borrowing because loans are over collateralized and held in smart contracts. Custody. Both sides hold their own assets. Fairness, everyone is entitled to the same pools and rates that they wish to participate in. And transparency, information around each pool supply, demand, and interest is clearly stated upfront and enforced on chain. I think a few of these things are only possible, especially privacy, is really only possible because it's being built on the layer 2 StarkNet instead of layer 1 Ethereum. So again, guys, this is one of those things that I talked about, that when I said that there are a lot of things that can only be done on layer 2s instead of and not on layer 1 Ethereum as well. But highly recommend giving this full blog post a read to check out what's kind of like going on here and what they're kind of like building. But yeah, as I said, this is going to be on StarkNet. This is really, really cool. I mean, StarkNet having a money market coming so early to their ecosystem is obviously very great. As I said before, there are a few key apps that each ecosystem needs to have. Obviously, one of them, or the top one, being an AMM or just like a decentralized exchange. I would argue the second one being a money market, because those two things together enable all the other apps to come and kind of like exist on the chain and actually get usage and be able to compose with each other and interoperate with each other, because they're like the core primitives of DeFi at the end of the day. So very cool to see this. Very cool to see that it's just not another kind of like fork of like Aave or a fork of Compound or a fork of anything else. It's something new, something native to StarkNet, not being deployed on L1, something to get excited about. Looking forward to learning more about zkLend as time progresses. So Hayden Adams from Uniswap put out a tweet today saying that you can now convert any token to ETH and directly donate to Ukraine in a single transaction on donate.uniswap.org. This is really cool. Like, no matter your views on this whole thing or whether you think it's right to donate to, the Ukraine war effort or not, I think what this shows is just how quickly capital can be be formed, or capital can be kind of pulled together in crypto, but also how we can do one-click things like convert the ETH. Convert any of your existing tokens into ETH and donate it to Ukraine in a single transaction. To do something like this with the traditional system, let me kind of like spell it out to you and how slow it would be. If you wanted to sell one of your stocks or shares, for example, for an asset to donate, so say for like dollars to donate to one of these efforts, you would have to liquidate the stock, and there may be a kind of like time limit on being able to sell that. There's no AMMs to sell it into, right? You can sell it into the open market, but depending on the liquidity, depending on what stock it is, blah, blah, all that sort of stuff. I mean, it's similar in crypto, but with AMMs, it kind of like levels it up. But you have to sell it. Then you have to get that money, right? And then there's a risk that you're probably going to get that money put on hold or something, because they're going to, like, depending on who you're with, they're not going to credit you the money straight away. You're going to have to withdraw it out of your kind of brokerage account into your normal bank account. That might take 24 hours, blah, blah, right? So you're already at kind of like all this friction just to do this. And then you want to donate it to Ukraine, well, maybe your bank blocks you from doing that. Maybe your bank blocks these kind of things from going on. Yeah, obviously Ukraine is not the one that's sanctioned, Russia is, but maybe your bank's like, well, no, we don't want you doing this. Banks can do that, right? That's why we hate banks, right? Because they can do that. Now compare it to what we have here with Uniswap. You have your digitally native tokens on Ethereum. You convert it to ETH, and you send the money to the Ukraine government's Ethereum address, all in one transaction. Takes 2 seconds, guys. I mean, it takes an Ethereum. At most, it's going to take one Ethereum block to do this. Maybe if you've got multiple tokens you want to do, it's going to take a bit. Obviously, the fees are going to be quite a little bit high because this is being done on layer 1. But ignoring the fees for a second here, I'm just talking about the speed of what you can do. Within 5 minutes, not even, if you've got lots, like 10, 15 different tokens you want to convert, you can convert them all into ETH, and each transaction will just kind of like go into the Ukraine government, all in kind of like one thing there. Done. All from the comfort of your kind of like own home, or from the comfort of doing it in a self-custodial way as well, not having to rely on centralized institutions. Zero chance of your assets being kind of like frozen, or near zero chance of your assets being frozen in your own Ethereum wallet. Obviously, there's always the slight chance that the Ethereum network becomes under attack, but that's just kind of like getting too into the weeds there. This is what crypto kind of like enables, and what's so powerful about it. On top of the self-custody stuff that I was talking about earlier, it's so powerful that we can kind of like do capital formation like this in an incredibly quick way, in a global way too. This isn't just cross state lines or in the same kind of like in the same country, so to speak. This is all over the world. This is someone in Australia, for example, because Australia is kind of far away from everything, being able to use a protocol that was developed by a US-based team that exists on Ethereum, which is a global network, and send these assets to Ukraine, which is not close to Australia, right? Like it's obviously in Europe, definitely not close to Australia. And I can do this all from the comfort of my own study, all in 10 minutes or less, all without having to worry to kind of like interact with any centralized institutions. And I get to make my own decisions with my own money. This is absolutely awesome. As I said, one of the key innovations on top of what I was talking about earlier. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of like highlight that for you guys, and definitely go use it if you want to donate to Ukraine. Maybe put some of those shit coins that are burning a hole in your wallet to use, because in most countries donations are also a tax write-off, so you may be able to kind of like swing something there with a lot of those coins that are just burning a hole in your wallet because they're down so much. Maybe you want to write them off as a loss and help a good cause while you're doing it. You can do that too, right? And another thing got to do with Uniswap was a tweet from Fidi Basta today, who said the Uniswap Effect. Uniswap launched on Polygon on the 21st of December 2021. It only took 21 days to become the first DEX by trading volume on Polygon. This is what I've talked about before about Uniswap's brand and kind of like trust and just overall awareness being so much bigger than everything else in crypto in the AMM space. Nothing comes close. 1inch, Balancer, Clipper, QuickSwap, SushiSwap, they're known to an extent. I mean, 1inch is obviously very popular. Balancer, SushiSwap, QuickSwap a bit less popular in terms of like overall crypto. And Clipper, I mean, obviously you can see from the volume share here, not very popular. But in terms of like crypto as a whole and the mindshare as a whole and what people have heard of before, pretty much everyone in crypto that has ever used anything on-chain has probably heard of Uniswap, right? Or one of its derivatives too, like PancakeSwap. A lot of people use that, I guess, like back in the day, during the mania. And that's why I've said before that like Uniswap's dominance is not going away anytime soon. Doesn't matter if other protocols are better in some way or offer something better or whatever else. Their dominance is here to stay for a lot of different reasons, but awareness and trust and security is a big one. People, you should be using aggregators because it's cheaper, but they don't because they just trust the Uniswap more. They're more aware of Uniswap. They're just kind of like, it's better to go through Uniswap than it is to go through an aggregator for them. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of like highlight this, that Uniswap really is just still absolutely kicking ass in the decentralized exchange space. All right, so I just wanted to quickly highlight a thread from Stone Cold Pat here, who basically starts this thread off by saying EIP 1559 is one of the most important upgrades ever. It guarantees a security budget for block producers, no instability at the tip. It makes gas prices predictable for the user, and it allows the network to temporarily handle burst traffic and not always run at max capacity. Now, I've talked about this in the past many times before, so I'm not going to harp on about this now. But Pat goes into a lot more detail in his thread here about each of these points, so I definitely highly recommend giving it a read. And I like threads like this because there was a large cohort of people for quite a while that were kind of like fighting 1559 after it went live, saying that it increased gas costs, that it's bad for the network, blah, blah, blah. And in reality, what increased gas costs was the NFT mania. I mean, we've seen gas going to the 20s, the 20 Gweis lately, and that's because on-chain activity is down a lot, right? As opposed to kind of like what it was previously. So I think reading this thread from Pat gives a lot of great insights into that. And I mean, at this point in time, it's objective that 1559 kind of like was good for the network and achieved all of its goals, and even worked to lower gas fees by about 7 or 8% across the board by making the gas fees more kind of like stable and making it so people didn't have to overpay as well. So very, very cool to see that. I'll link this in the YouTube description for you to give the thread a read. All right, finally here we have Tally Cash with an update that you can now swap tokens inside your Tally wallet. So all fees go straight to the community multisig, and Tally swaps are almost half the cost of MetaMask. So this is obviously similar to MetaMask swaps that they have inside the MetaMask wallet, but now if you're using the Tally wallet, you can just go to the swap interface and do the same thing as MetaMask. So just wanted to highlight this for you guys out there that are using Tally. This is just another alternative to MetaMask, which I'm sure maybe some of you are using. Maybe, it's not very popular compared to MetaMask yet because it's relatively new, but it's cool that there's already a swap feature in there. And as it says, it's cheaper than MetaMask here. But yeah, just wanted to highlight that for you guys, any of you guys using it. And definitely go give Tally a try if you haven't yet. I've tried it on Chrome before, but I just, I'm still using MetaMask obviously because I trust MetaMask more, and kind of like it kind of like acts weird sometimes with other wallets if you have both installed and stuff like that. So I had to remove Tally, but yeah, definitely cool to see this, and go check it out if you haven't yet. But I think on that note, I'm going to end it there for today. So thank everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.